So now we're going to start Module 2, and we're going to go ahead and delve into psychodynamic psychotherapies. This is probably one of the less popular approaches currently, and it's just, we'll see why. It's just not as timely as some of the others, though there have been responses and new kind of derivatives of these therapies from the original one. So we'll go ahead and start talking about that. Of course, in Module 1, which was quite a long module, apologies about that, but it did go into a lot of the biological kind of interventions in using the biological paradigm. So that's what we're going to do here with psychodynamic. In psychodynamic, what the idea is to uncover these unconscious kind of inner conflicts and bring them into conscious awareness. And so people tended to use what we called Freudian psychoanalysis. And psychoanalysis had many different parts to it, and there were various techniques to help elicit and uncover these unconscious inner conflicts. Now, the challenge, of course, is how do you get it to the unconscious? Because the moment you become aware of it, then it is conscious, and you may somehow use a defense mechanism or something to avoid bringing that into conscious awareness. And so Freud developed several techniques to really try to kind of get beyond the defenses that we naturally put up according to this approach. And so you can see here that one of the first Freudian psychoanalysis techniques is something called free association. And free association reveals aspects of the unconscious mind. In it, patients speak freely about whatever thoughts cross their mind, and it's the cornerstone of psychoanalysis. So if you've ever seen a couch that people are lying on and there's somebody sitting behind them listening to them, that is a free associative Freudian kind of technique to try to get to the unconscious mind. Now, the benefit is it does reveal some of those aspects. Information about the unconscious was revealed in things through like dreams or slips of the tongue, sometimes referred to as Freudian slips. And these are kind of the windows into the unconscious because we feel like in dreams and these slips of the tongue, that is when our defense mechanisms are the weakest and therefore can slip by the unconscious motivations. So what I mean by slips of the tongue, let's say a young man sees an attractive woman going by, and then whoever they're eating with says, what do you think of the food that you're eating? And they said, that's the best one I've had in a long time. They were the breast sandwich. And the breast part, as opposed to best, slips out, showing that there is some sort of unconscious motivation and attraction to the woman that just passed by. That's just one example of a Freudian slip. So if you ever hear that in conversation, that is what it's referring to. Now, the issue, of course, is that psychoanalysis is not a quick process, as I talked about in Module 1. So this approach is in decline. It requires a lot of time, expense, and self-exploration. And so it tends to be time-wise several hours a week. So, Freudian therapists usually don't see a whole lot of clients because they are always there with people kind of trying to do this free association and other techniques. It tends to be more expensive, as you might imagine. You got to get paid for every hour you spend, and they're not going to be cheap. So you got to be financially secure, and you need to be able to be somewhat introspective, willing to view your past and really what is going on in kind of nitty-gritty detail. Like a lot of Freudian stuff, there's not a lot of research that's been conducted on how effective it is. I mean, people may feel it's effective, but there's no hard data. And it's because it's very hard to say how effective it is in unlocking unconscious motivations and then correcting those to better functioning going forward. So what we're really seeing in this day and age is a shift from the psychoanalysis to a briefer or time limit, what they call psychodynamic psychotherapy. So it still uses some of the same techniques, but it is different, and we'll see that in the next slide. So in psychodynamic therapy, It's derived from the psychoanalysis that we were just talking about. But the therapist, as opposed to sitting passively behind and only occasionally giving some insights, is going to be more directive and engaged. And the treatment is generally briefer than psychoanalysis. So you can say that it's a better approach, but there's still some issues about what sort of empirical support there is. So there tends to be pockets where these approaches are more popular. So the Northeast, I'm talking like New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, that type of area, you can still see and find psychodynamic therapists. You don't really find them much here in Kentucky or in a lot of the more central U.S. So if you are really want to go have some psychotherapy with using the psychodynamic approach, it may be a pretty hard search to find it. Now, short term, as I said, uses a lot of these techniques. It's shorter, less expensive. It is amenable to research, so they can try to do, but we still seem to have fairly weak. And the approach there really is focusing on corrective emotion experiences. Okay. Now, there is another approach that is more specific in its focus, and that's the interpersonal psychotherapy. It is focusing on changing emotions and styles of interacting in close relationships. And there is solid research to support this particular psychodynamic approach. And it really looking at, spousal or really good friends or family kind of relationships. And what the therapist's main goal here is to help clients kind of recognize the patterns of relating to other individuals and any associated emotional upheavals that occur in interacting or patterns of relating, and to make changes or have insights so that future relationships or even the current ones can be better managed. So the view is in this approach with interpersonal that parent-child, other close relationships, those are the kind of teaching models we use to then relate to others later on. And I think this borrows a little bit from kind of attachment theory too, though there is a whole other approach based on attachment theory. But the idea, and remember, Freud really emphasized these kind of early relationships setting the stage. So that's where the interpersonal psychotherapy kind of comes in with the Freudian influence. So this approach, of all the psychodynamic approaches, this is probably the one that would be the most empirically validated. And you can see here that we have a kind of overview of interpersonal therapy, where it's time limited, it's focused on relationships and in the relationships between your mood and social circumstances there. And you can see kind of some of the approach, the different techniques that are hopefully improved there through this entire process. So there's some educational aspects of interpersonal therapy, clarifying the feelings and expectations of others, clarifying what roles people play in their family, their community, and then facilitates their own social competence so that they can fit into the roles that are expected of them, or change those if those are not adequate. So that's an overview of psychodynamic psychotherapies. And what we're going to do next in Module 3 is look at cognitive behavior approaches, but really focusing on the behavioral aspect through things like exposure, which is always a real interesting kind of therapeutic technique. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you for Module 3.